Daniel Reed stood outside St. Mary's Hospital while a thin drizzle soaked into his coat. The automatic doors opened and closed behind him with a mechanical sigh, and every time they did, he glanced up from his phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Just the same empty screen reflecting his tired face back at him. He told himself he wasn't waiting. He told himself he had simply stepped outside for fresh air. But the truth sat heavy in his chest. He was hoping his son would call. Mark hadn't spoken to him properly in weeks. Their last conversation had ended with sharp words about selling the family house. Mark had called it practical. Daniel had called it betrayal. Since then, silence. Daniel sat on a damp wooden bench near the entrance, staring at the gray sky. He noticed people moving quickly around him, nurses rushing in, families huddled under umbrellas, a delivery man wheeling boxes inside. No one looked at anyone else for long. Everyone seemed to be carrying their own storms. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman in a wheelchair struggled near the curb. Her thin arms pushed against the wheels, but they barely moved. A faded blue shawl covered her shoulders, and her white hair clung to her temples from the rain. Cars passed too close. People stepped around her as if she were an obstacle instead of a person. Daniel didn't think. He stood and hurried toward her. "Let me help you," he said gently. She looked up at him with surprisingly sharp eyes. They were not the eyes of someone defeated. They were observant, calculating, alive. "You look like a man who needs help more than I do," she replied. He blinked, startled, then offered a small smile. "Maybe we both do." He took hold of the wheelchair handles and guided her toward the hospital entrance. Her body felt fragile beneath the shawl, but her presence felt strong, almost commanding. Inside, under the bright fluorescent lights, she placed a thin hand on his wrist, stopping him. "Pretend I'm your mother," she said quietly but firmly. "Your son will regret what he did." Daniel's heart stumbled. He hadn't mentioned his son. He hadn't said a word about why he was here. "I'm sorry," he asked. She studied his face. A father waiting for a call that doesn't come. "I've seen that look before." He swallowed hard. Something about her tone, calm, certain, made him uneasy. "You don't know anything about me." "Don't I?" she replied softly. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. Daniel felt exposed, as if she had peeled back the layers he carefully kept hidden. "What's your name?" he asked. "Margaret," she said. "And yours?" "Daniel." "Well, Daniel," she said, releasing his wrist, "sometimes children must be reminded what they are losing." He didn't know why, but he didn't walk away. The hospital cafe smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Daniel helped Margaret to a small table near the window. She insisted on paying for her tea, though her hands trembled as she reached into her purse. He pretended not to notice and covered the bill before she could protest. "So," she said, stirring her tea slowly, "tell me about him." Daniel hesitated. He hadn't planned to open up to a stranger. But something about Margaret felt different. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking because she already understood. "He thinks I'm stubborn," Daniel admitted. "Thinks I'm holding on to things that don't matter anymore." "And are you?" "It's my house," Daniel said quietly. "My wife and I built it from nothing. Every wall has a memory." Margaret nodded. "My son said I was holding on to the past too. He said I needed somewhere easier. Somewhere managed." Daniel frowned. "You mean?" "Yes," she said calmly. "He signed the papers. Left me here." There was no bitterness in her voice. That made it worse. "Does he visit?" Daniel asked. Margaret smiled faintly. "If he did, I wouldn't be having tea with you." Daniel looked down at his hands. "Mark isn't like that. He's just busy." "Busy is a convenient word," she replied. "It hides many things." He felt defensive. "He has responsibilities. Work. Loans. A life." "And you?" she asked gently. "Were you not busy when he was young?" The question pierced him. He remembered working double shifts, missing dinners, fixing broken toys late at night. "I did what I had to," he said. "And so did I," Margaret replied. "Yet here we are." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with shared understanding. When Daniel stood to leave, she touched his sleeve. Come back tomorrow, she said. Pretend I'm your mother. Let him see. See what? That you can give love elsewhere. He shook his head. That sounds manipulative. It's not revenge, she said softly. It's reflection. He left the hospital that evening with her words echoing in his mind. The next day, he returned. Margaret was waiting near the garden doors, her shawl neatly arranged, her eyes scanning the entrance as if she knew he would come. You came, she said simply. I don't know why, he admitted. Yes, you do. They spent hours in the small hospital garden. The rain had stopped, leaving everything smelling fresh. Margaret told stories of her years as a school principal, of stubborn students who later became doctors, of shy girls who found their voices. You remind me of one of them, she teased. Which one? Daniel asked. The one who didn't realize his worth. He laughed despite himself. At one point, a nurse offered to take their picture. Margaret insisted. Smile, Daniel, she instructed. He did. Later that evening, at her urging, he posted the photo online with a simple caption, spending time with someone who reminds me what unconditional love feels like. Within an hour, his phone buzzed. Mark. Who is that? Daniel stared at the message. His chest tightened. Margaret, sitting beside him, watched his expression change. Don't answer yet, she said. Why? Because silence makes people think. 3 days later, Mark walked into the hospital, anger and confusion written across his face. He found Daniel sitting beside Margaret's bed, reading aloud from a worn novel. Dad, Mark said sharply. What's going on? Daniel looked up calmly. Mark. This is Margaret. Margaret's gaze assessed him carefully. You must be the busy son. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Dad, why are you posting things like that? People are asking questions. Daniel closed the book slowly. Maybe they should. Mark's voice softened. Are you replacing Mom? The words hit hard. No one replaces a mother, Margaret said gently. But neglect creates space. Mark fell silent. In the hallway, he confronted Daniel. I was stressed. I didn't mean to push you away. You told me to sell the house, Daniel said quietly. You said I was living in the past. Mark ran a hand through his hair. I just wanted things to be easier. For who? Daniel asked. Margaret wheeled herself into the hallway. My son said the same thing. Mark looked at her. He said I was in the way, she continued. Now he doesn't visit at all. The weight of her words settled heavily. She removed a thin silver bracelet from her wrist. He gave me this when he was 10. Promise to protect me. She handed it to Mark. Promises are easy when you're young. Mark's eyes filled with tears. Does he ever call? No, she said simply. And one day he will regret it. Mark stayed that evening. He watched his father adjust Margaret's blanket with tenderness. He remembered childhood nights when Daniel worked late but still showed up to school plays. Dad, he whispered, I'm sorry. Daniel's eyes shone. He pulled his son into a hug. Margaret watched quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks. The next morning, Margaret didn't wake up. She passed peacefully in her sleep. On her bedside table was a note. If you are reading this, it means the lesson worked. Don't waste time. Love loudly. M. Mark broke down. She saved us. Daniel nodded, gripping his son's shoulder. Months later, father and son renovated the old house together. They painted walls, fixed broken steps, and laughed in rooms once filled with silence. One small corner became a reading space. They called it Margaret's Corner. Her photo hung on the wall, the first one taken in the garden. Underneath, a plaque read, Pretend I'm your mother, so your son never regrets what he did. Mark visited every weekend now. Sometimes they volunteered at the hospital, sitting beside elderly patients who had no visitors. And whenever Daniel saw an empty wheelchair near the entrance, he remembered the rainy afternoon when a stranger looked into his soul and spoke the truth he needed to hear. Some people don't come into your life to stay. They come to repair what's breaking. And then they quietly leave, knowing their work is done.